and it's been a pleasure to everybody today. It's been fantastic presentations. So I'll just enter into the full Zoom. And I've tried to be a little creative, as that's what I'm talking about with the presentation, with getting a little bit away from PowerPoints and decided to use this program, which I hope works well during this. So I want to, as you mentioned, talk about inclusion with design and creativity. And before I start, this will be from two perspectives. This will be from a perspective as a professional, of course, as a designer who is always advocating about creativity, but also as a mother. And that is being as a mother of a neurodiverse son. And so a lot of my inspiration has really come from my personal lived experiences, and then combining that as a designer who is always looking for problem solving situations. And so let's see if we can start. So yes, so I, as I say, advocate a lot about inclusivity, and also looking at environments, as in designing environments, also the processes that we use, the design processes within education, and also in terms of nurturing the creativity and empowering children using critical thinking, not just in education, but also within urban design, within the public realm, many different environments. So going on to the topics here. Now, of course, many of us are aware creativity is important, but I have found it an incredibly valuable tool in what I do, and also for my family, and also within my work. So of course we know that it helps emotional development, it helps language communication. We've seen presentations today where in a roundabout way it's really emphasizing this need for creativity and empowering. So we also realize that it is very much leading to innovative thinking, and it also gives us as a society the skill of looking through different perspectives and a different lens. And I think this is incredibly important when we think about some of the challenges that we face today that have been mentioned, of course, from the Black Lives Matter to the COVID challenge, of we need to be looking in a very inclusive way and looking in a very creative way at problem solving for some of these solutions. Now, of course, there was a infamous TED talk by Sir Ken Robinson, which of course spoke about the benefits of creativity. And this is a wonderful visualization by Sylvia Duckworth, where it just visualizes the kind of the benefits of creativity and thinking in a multidisciplinary way. If I think of my own career, as Felicia herself mentioned earlier, I've also moved from being in accountancy and tax, going on to study design, working in the hotel industry, and then going on as a social entrepreneur and dabbling in many different sectors, because I feel I have that ability through the creativity that I have learned and through the skills to adapt within the different sectors. So, of course, there's been many studies done on creativity and the effect of play. There's a wonderful study also that the Lego Foundation shared on the benefits of neuroscience and learning through play, and obviously the evidence and this joy that it creates, because I can truly say for me it has created an enormous amount of joy, as it has done when I've engaged in creative activities with children, including my own, or in some of the workshops that I've done. Of course, it's very much, as we say, a neuroscientific thing that's also related to our prefrontal cortex, and it, you know, it enhances those dopamines and the neurotransmitter that helps regulate the reward. And that pleasure and emotion in the brain is well recognized within this kind of reward network part of the midbrain. And of course, the connection between joy and learning for me has been very, you know, this has been evident in my own experience, and it's also now evident with this neuroscientific evidence. So of course, as I say, there's been many studies done, and also the link between creativity and the critical thinking. Especially now, as I mentioned, for this kind of complex globalized world, looking at the future of work, future of education, looking at the way societies are changing and things are moving incredibly fast. And so this is the one aspect, at least while we have the digital and the robotic side, that as humans, we are able to provide the critical thinking and the creativity, these human-centric skills. And also, of course, very much important to our democratic societies. And without mentioning names, of course, sometimes we can see when the lack of critical thinking skills are not there in leadership, that our societies can very much suffer from that. And so, of course, just going deeper into this and to why it's important, you know, it said, as I've mentioned in a previous video, of course, with Felicia, about that we make 35,000 conscious decisions a day, and as children we make 3,000. How do we encourage those decisions to be good decisions? How do we encourage this ability to think independently, to question, to, again, many of the things that we've mentioned and heard today about the why question, as Dr. Rhodes also mentioned. We need to think independently. We need to compare, contrast. We need, in these diverse societies that we have, to encourage our neurodiverse community and neurotypical community, for everyone together to be able to question. Now, I link this also, naturally it's an occupational hazard, with the design and the design thinking, because the design thinking for me develops that empathy, and it gives us a deeper understanding. And also with using and looking at different brainstorming techniques and tools, visualizing, with the storytelling, which is incredibly important, with the testing, with encouraging environments for experimentation, and also very much looking at not focusing on the success, but the process. It's the process that's important, that if we don't succeed, it's okay, we can try again, we can test again. And this is very much evident, of course, in the design thinking route of when we have that empathy, we take a human-centric view, we very much step in the shoes of the other to understand what are they feeling, why are they feeling that way, and also defining the questions. What are the right questions we must ask? And also being, as I said, mentioning the real kind of brainstorming and the experimentation that is incredibly important. I also link this a little bit into the, as well as the design thinking and the creativity, it's also about futures literacy. How do we look at the future? How can we anticipate? Now, UNESCO's doing a very interesting course on, you know, it's actually a program on the futures literacy, which has also become incredibly interesting. And again, it's very much about the imagination and the creativity. How can we look, what could be that future? Now, in my own experience, when I relate it to my son, it can be looking at what kind of future can you have? What are the different kinds of jobs you would like? What are the clothes you would wear? How can we visualize this? How can we do a little storyboard so it gives a sense of hope? Also, of course, the future has the fear, naturally, because it's the unknown, we don't know. But yet, if we have the ability to imagine and create, we at least can generate through our imagination, you know, try and bring some sense to it. So this is incredibly important. Also, as adults, you know, we need to continue this creativity going through from the childhood, going through to the teenage years. How do we create the sense of engagement? How do we create that motivation that we need? And again, it's through the joy, it's through the creativity of allowing and having the freedom of the imagination. Also, it's about really creating, in a way, a vision of, through the storytelling, which is incredibly important. Also, what I would like to do is share my own story through some of the projects that I have been able to and had the pleasure to do. And as I say, as somebody who's not an academic and a teacher, I've been able to approach schools. I've been able to approach teachers and academics and share some of these thoughts, and also be thankfully with these schools, it's been open. They've been open to experiment. They've been willing to actually, you know, take that step and see how can we work together. Excuse me, because I also believe very much we're all change makers. We all have the ability and the power to educate and to empower our youth. And I think this is incredibly important. So with some of these projects, it was very much about design by doing. What does this mean, critical thinking? What does it mean, the creativity beyond the obvious? What does it mean for the design thinking? So it was looking at projects with Analogue to Digital, a program that I decided to co-design and co-create with my son and his friends, which was looking at his special needs school, as well as looking at the mainstream schools and wanting the children from both schools to work together and experiment and look at the creativity, but also the digital skills, and to design a program which was very much around allowing and empowering children to design their own narrative and to come up with their own storytelling. So the workshops that we did was in a very inclusive and safe environment. And these children, some of them had never met each other. So what we did was the creative process in the morning. It was all the typical creative tools of the painting, of the Lego making, of the clay making, but also it was giving a sense, a kind of spatial awareness of going from the 2D world into the 3D world, and allowing also teachers to be part of this, of course, which they said themselves that they had a slight fear of allowing, of not giving imagination in a box, not telling children what to do, but taking instead a role of facilitation and mentorship, which is the role that we took. We were posing the questions: what tools do you want to interact with? If you want to paint, how do you want to paint? It's not necessarily just with a brush, it can be with your fingers. And then moving from this to the technical tools, digital tools, which of course kids, without a doubt, they're incredibly tech savvy nowadays, so they're already playing with their Minecraft, etc. But some of them hadn't 3D printed, some of them had never experienced VR. So it was really looking at how they could have that experimentation and all be able to actually 3D print a name tag. And so giving them this joy, this experimentation of just this freedom was incredible. And it also empowered, thankfully, and validated a way of a direction, I would say, that the schools wanted to take, with also looking at STEAM, which is a STEM with the arts. So one of the schools, in fact, went for a European project, won it, and in fact, they installed a STEAM lab because they wanted to install more creativity, more experimentation, and also bridge that digital divide, but also encourage more creativity. Another project briefly was with children from Slovenia, where we were mentoring, and these were older children in their teens, where we were looking at global challenges like climate change, but giving an open question: what problem would you want to solve with the climate change? And so with this, the children came up with an object they wanted to design, which was to do with measuring air quality pollution. And so it was allowing them, again, this experimentation through the mentoring and the facilitation. How would this look? Where would you put it? What would the brand be like? How would you want to market this? Do you want to test this out with the people? but it also stemmed from their personal concern about the climate and about air pollution. So it also stemmed from something that mattered. So it was a personal, each of them had a personal story they also wanted to tell. And it was children that had never met each other before. And that was very interesting. But then there was also a local facilitation from a Fab Lab. So it was incredibly interesting to see how they could mix together and come up and solve the problems with co-designing. We did another one with, this is more about public space and environment. How do we co-design with youth, with citizens of a community, an inclusive and accessible space, public space that doesn't have the ramp, that doesn't have the high pavements, but it's got that possibly has the ramps, that has more greenery, that has more nature, which automatically creates a sense of joy and has a positive effect on our well-being. And so we look at different projects, and always with co-designing, always with the participation, but anticipation also, with anticipating what could be next. Let's imagine and create together. So they're really these engagement projects where it was looking at individuals, and the emphasis really on what a child or what an individual can do rather than what they can't do. So I'm very glad this presentation seemed to have worked quite with a good flow there with the Prezi. But I just want to sort of towards the end leave with a quote of, you know, the individuals who are neurodiverse are that we're all individuals as human beings, and we all need to be treated equally and fairly. And we need to discover our own strengths, and creativity allows for this, allows for our imagination. It allows us to empower our youth in our civic society if we give that freedom of participation and build resilient communities and diverse communities, which is incredibly important. And then I leave on the last image. I always have this in all my presentations, which is Yeiyo Kusama, a Japanese artist who has suffered from mental health challenges, and she is incredibly successful through her imagination and creativity, and has various exhibitions around the world where she designs a world of polka dots. So thank you very much for listening. And as I say, I think we all can contribute to education and empowering our communities. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Rozina. What a powerful message. And just reading from the chat box, the audience, it says, really effective presentation. She loves the artist. It's Tanya Cradon.